Part 5. Visions Collapse. Part 5. Visions Collapse. Sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment. Rumi, Divan, Trans Coleman Barks. Chapter 11. The Age of Features. Feature engineering was a craft with the intimacy of handwriting. Mara visited a vision lab where whiteboards were filled with sketches of edges, SIFT descriptors, and Hogg gradients. People spoke about feature extractors the way chefs speak about knives, with familiarity, pride, taste. A researcher named Daniel showed her a feature pipeline he'd refined for months. He described it like an instrument he had tuned. "It's elegant," Daniel said. "It captures what matters." Mara believed him. The extractor worked. It improved results. It produced papers. It also grew heavier. The world was too messy. Lighting changed. Angles lied. Backgrounds fooled. Every new feature fixed one failure mode and created two more. Daniel's codebase became ornate, beautiful, brittle. At a workshop, someone presented a neural approach. Features learned from data rather than handcrafted. Daniel scoffed afterward. "It's a black box," he said. "You can't understand what it's doing." Mara had heard the complaint before, in chess, in speech, in her own work. It was never only about understanding. It was about dignity. To be replaced by a method you don't respect feels like humiliation. Daniel did not fear being wrong. He feared being made irrelevant by something that did not share his values. Chapter 12. ImageNet as Instrument. Fei Li built an arena. She called it a dataset. She called it an effort to organize the visual world. But what she made was more than a collection of images. It was an instrument that would force a community to agree on what counted as success. For Mara, ImageNet had the texture of inevitability. Not because the idea was obvious, at the time it wasn't, but because she could feel the field's hunger shifting. People were tired of philosophical fights that could not be settled. They wanted a number. They wanted a public verdict. They wanted the argument to end. Fei gave them a place where the argument could die quickly. In the years leading up to the Lake Tahoe shock, Mara visited Daniel's lab more often. Not because she had converted to feature engineering, but because Daniel was what she had become. A person with a craft, a taste, an identity tied to a method. She recognized the danger in him because she recognized it in herself. One late evening, Daniel showed her a new extractor the way you show someone a secret weapon. "I'm telling you," he said, voice low as if the walls might report him. "If we just add this invariance, we'll close the gap." Mara looked at the code and felt the familiar mix of admiration and dread. It was elegant. It was also more weight on a system already heavy with human assumptions. "Close the gap to what?" she asked. Daniel frowned. "To whatever wins." He didn't say neural nets. He didn't need to. Everyone in Vision had heard the rumors. Hinton's group, GPUs, an approach that treated features as something the machine should learn, not something humans should design. Daniel waved the idea away with a practiced contempt. "It's a black box," he said again. "It's not vision, it's correlation." Mara heard the word "not" and felt the old pattern. When a method threatens your identity, you don't first argue performance, you argue legitimacy. But the field was building a new god, and legitimacy in the new religion came from a leaderboard. On a different coast, a different kind of scene unfolded. Smaller, quieter, more dangerous than a conference talk. Mara didn't witness it directly. She heard it later, as story, the way you hear about a heist. A few people in the right room with the right hardware doing something no one else could yet afford. A student's bedroom, an ordinary room repurposed into a furnace. The desk was too small. The chair was cheap. The bed, pushed against a wall, carried a rumpled blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and exhaustion. A desk lamp threw hard light across a keyboard, and a notebook filled with cramped handwriting, layer sizes, error rates, arrows, equations half erased. On the floor, a tower case hummed with the steady aggression of machinery working past what was comfortable. Fans spun, heat gathered. The air grew stale in a way that felt biological, like a body running a fever. Alex Krizhevsky sat with his shoulders rounded, eyes dry, fingers stained with the faint grime of hardware and too many hours. He had learned to read the training run the way gamblers read roulette. Small changes in loss, small signs of stability, the terrible swing between hope and dread. The GPU, this new kind of muscle the field was just beginning to afford, ran hot enough that the room's temperature became a second clock. If the case got too warm, the run became unstable. If the run crashed, you didn't just lose time, you lost the fragile emotional momentum that keeps you returning to the keyboard after midnight. The monitor showed what looked like nothing to outsiders. Lines, numbers, a progress bar creeping forward like a prisoner on a long sentence. In another window, email threads scrolled, messages from Jeffrey Hinton with the tone of a man who had waited decades and now had no patience left for politeness. Short sentences, targeted urgency, the kind of writing that is almost a weapon. If this works, the field changes. Ilya Sutskever appeared in the doorway at odd hours, carrying a paper cup of coffee that smelled burnt, his eyes alert in a way that suggested he was running on conviction more than sleep. They didn't speak much. There was nothing to say that mattered more than the run. Sometimes Alex would whisper a profanity when the curve plateaued. Sometimes he would go very still when the curve dipped, as if movement might scare the improvement away. The algorithm learned to see by grinding through millions of images like ore, raw, indifferent material, turned into something valuable only through heat and repetition. It did not understand edges the way Daniel understood edges. It did not honor feature engineering. It did not care about taste. It cared about one thing, the number. Night after night, Krizhevsky's code ran while the world slept. Outside the bedroom, the internet scrolled. The city breathed. The field continued to argue about principles. Inside, the furnace kept working. And in those nights the field's future was being computed into existence, a leaderboard is a public mirror. People began to optimize for the metric. They began to speak in error rates. They began to treat the number as truth. Mara understood why. Numbers end arguments. Numbers decide grants. Numbers decide careers. Daniel was enthusiastic at first. "This will be great," he said. "We can finally compare methods." Mara looked at the leaderboard and felt a chill. Comparing methods is not the same as understanding them. But the field began to confuse the two. The board was being set. The pieces were being arranged. And the furnace of computation, now fed by GPUs, now made practical by engineering, was waiting for its moment to enter the arena and do what it did best: scale. Chapter 13, Lake Tahoe, 2012. The conference hall at Lake Tahoe had the relaxed feel of a community that thought it knew itself. People drank coffee. They ran into old friends. They complained about reviewers with affectionate bitterness. The future, they assumed, would arrive as a continuation of the past. Incremental, legible, negotiated. Mara arrived early and chose a seat near an aisle, not out of strategy, but out of habit. In the winters, you learn to sit near exits. You learn to keep an escape route for your dignity. You tell yourself it's just logistics. It's not. It's the nervous system remembering what it costs to be trapped in a room while an era ends. The hall smelled like carpet shampoo and espresso. The air conditioning ran too cold for October, the way conference centers always run too cold, as if discomfort were part of the price of seriousness. Lanyards swung on chests. Laptop lids snapped open and shut like nervous eyelids. A few people checked their phones, already half elsewhere, rehearsing the next conversation that would matter more than the current talk. In the lobby outside, the hotel bar was already open, bottles lined up behind glass, amber and clear and dark red. It struck Mara as a joke the universe was telling on purpose. A field about to get intoxicated kept itself caffeinated and sober, as if sobriety were a virtue that could protect you from shock. This room didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a tasting room right before the pour. Everyone confident they knew the flavor profile. Everyone ready to nod knowingly at the notes they'd already decided were there. Daniel sat beside her, shoulders tight. He had been performing confidence all week the way he performed it in the lab, by talking faster than his doubt could catch up. "This is just hype," he said quietly, though his eyes never left the stage. "Neural nets are fine, but features are science." Mara didn't answer. She didn't trust herself to answer honestly. She had learned the hard way that the thing a person calls science is often just their identity wearing a lab coat. The speaker walked on stage. A click. A bright rectangle of slides. The usual opening jokes, half-baked, obligated. People smiled in the practiced way of conference audiences, polite enough to be seen, not interested enough to be moved. Then the talk tightened. The jokes stopped. The slide deck began to accelerate toward its payload. Mara watched the room's attention gather, not as curiosity, but as hunger. She recognized it. The same hunger as the chess match. The hunger of a field waiting for a number to tell it what it is allowed to believe. Then the slide went up. 15.3%. 26.2%. Two numbers, one above the other, and the air changed. The error rate was 15.3%. In the second row, someone's hand went to their chest. Mara felt it physically, like pressure shifting before a storm. The room's noise lowered. People stopped fidgeting. The audience froze the way animals freeze when the world violates the map in their heads. It wasn't joy. It wasn't even fear at first. It was the first swallow of something stronger than you expected. An unwilled heat in the throat. The brief dizziness of realizing your body has already accepted the drink before your mind can object. In the front row, someone laughed once, short, disbelieving, then stopped as if the sound had been confiscated. Mara watched faces cycle through the same sequence she had seen in chess. Disbelief, rationalization, conversion, disbelief, impossible, rationalization, it must be a trick. Conversion, how do we do that too? Daniel's hand went to his badge as if he needed something to hold on to. Daniel leaned forward so hard his badge swung like a pendulum. "That can't be right," he whispered. Mara did not look at Daniel. She kept her eyes on the slide, on the numbers that had become a verdict. She felt her own chest tighten in a way she recognized too well. Not fear of being wrong, but fear of being repriced. The speaker didn't gloat. That was part of the horror. The speaker sounded almost careful, as if aware that the room contained people whose careers were now becoming before and after in real time. Mara heard someone behind them mutter, not to anyone in particular, 15.3. The way you say a death sentence. On stage, the speaker did not sound triumphant. The speaker sounded almost apologetic, as if presenting the numbers required an apology to the era they were ending. The talk continued, but the room was no longer listening to explanation. Explanation was irrelevant now. The number had already done the work. Mara glanced around and saw people doing what humans do when their world tilts, scanning for allies, for authority, for someone to tell them how to feel. Some faces looked offended. Some looked thrilled. Most looked afraid. Daniel sat very still, as if any movement might make the new reality become permanent. Afterward, the hallway became chaos. People clustered around laptops. They asked technical questions with the frantic energy of those trying to find a loophole in reality. How big was the model? What tricks did they use? Is the dataset clean? Maybe it's overfitting. Maybe it won't generalize. Mara stepped into the hallway and felt the temperature change again, not from air conditioning, but from social heat. 100 conversations ignited at once. People spoke too loudly. People laughed too sharply. People performed skepticism the way they performed confidence, to protect themselves. The room had the sound of sudden intoxication, not celebration, but disorientation. Like a crowd that had been handed a bottle they didn't ask for and now had to pretend they weren't affected by it. Sentences came out too fast. Eyes shone too brightly. People repeated each other's jargon the way drunk people repeat a story, hoping repetition will make it coherent. She heard the same phrases repeat like a chant. GPU, dropout, data augmentation, convolutions. As if naming components could turn the verdict back into a technical detail rather than a cultural event. At the edge of one cluster, an older researcher, someone whose papers Mara had cited when she was younger, spoke with forced calm. "It's impressive," he said, "but it's not principled." Mara watched the word principled hang in the air like incense. It was a moral claim. It meant, this shouldn't count, even if it wins. Someone younger, already converting, shrugged. "But it wins," the younger one said, as if stating a law of physics. "And I heard Google is bidding." Bidding? For the team. For Hinton. 44 million. For 3 people and no product. The number rippled through the group. 44 million was not a grant. It was a valuation. It was the market saying that the old currency, papers, citations, elegance, had just been devalued against the new currency. Results. Daniel stood near a pillar, eyes unfocused. Mara could see him trying to do the mental math of a life. But the scoreboard did not care about coping narratives. The number was public. The humiliation was shared. Daniel's voice dropped. "I spent 10 years, he said. 10 years on features." The sentence wasn't self-pity. It was inventory. 10 years is not just time. 10 years is grants and promotions and conferences and friendships and rivals and the slow accumulation of identity. 10 years is a life. Mara felt the impulse to comfort him rise and fail. Comfort would require a lie, that the field would honor his craft even as it moved on. Mara looked at him and saw the moment a life's work gets repriced. Not because it was worthless, because the market of attention had moved. Inside, the future had arrived. It did not ask for permission. And as Mara walked back to her hotel room, she had the first clear sense that the furnace was no longer a metaphor. It was now the organizing principle of the field. In the lobby, a bar TV played sports highlights with the sound off. The captions scrolled. People laughed at something unrelated. The world outside the conference did not notice the shift that had just happened inside it. Mara rode the elevator alone. The carpeted box rose smoothly, silently, like a machine that had learned the single skill it needed. She stared at her reflection in the brass doors and saw, for the first time in years, the real shape of her fear. It wasn't that neural nets would win. It was that they would win in a way that made her old reasons feel childish. In her room, she didn't turn on the lights. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened her laptop. She refreshed the leaderboard as if the number might change back. It didn't. The number sat there like Move 37, a fact that refused to turn into a reason. Downstairs, the hotel lobby was still loud with conference life, laughter that sounded slightly too sharp, voices performing calm for strangers. Mara spotted Daniel near the edge of a cluster, holding a paper cup of coffee like it was a prop he didn't know how to use anymore. He looked up when she approached and tried to smile. It didn't hold. "I can't," he said, and the bluntness of it startled her. "I can't even tell what to do next." Mara followed him out through the glass doors, and in air smelled like pine and exhaust and distant lake water. The night was cold enough to feel honest. Behind them, the conference center glowed warm and loud, full of people drinking the new truth in public, some sipping carefully, some gulping, some insisting it wasn't wine at all, just data. Out here, in the dark, you could hear the quieter part, the swallowing. Their footsteps made small, hard sounds on asphalt. The conference center behind them glowed with warm light, full of people making plans as if plans could domesticate a verdict. Daniel walked faster than he needed to, as if speed might outrun humiliation. At his rental car, he stopped and fumbled his keys. His fingers shook once, barely. He hid it by turning his hand into a shrug. 10 years, he said again, quieter. Not for Mara, for himself. Like a man reciting a number to make it real. Mara waited for him to turn it into a joke. He didn't. He stared at the windshield as if it might show him a future. The glass reflected the hotel lights. Soft, impersonal, an overlay of brightness that made his face look slightly foreign. "Do you think they're
I'm tired of sitting.
right?" he asked. Mara knew what he meant. Not whether the number was right, whether the world that rewarded the number was right. She wanted to say something kind. Kindness here would be a lie. "I think it's happening," she said.
Yes.
Daniel's jaw tightened. He nodded once, the way you nod when you feel the floor move and can't argue with weather. He opened the car door. The interior light came on, exposing the small mess of living. A badge on the passenger seat, a folded program, a receipt. The debris of a day that had ended an era. Before he got in, he looked back at the conference hall, then at Mara, as if checking whether she had witnessed him properly. "I don't know who I am if this is the world," he said. Then he slid into the driver's seat and shut the door. The car pulled out slowly, taillights fading into the dark. Mara stood alone under a parking lot lamp that hummed faintly, the sound of electricity doing its indifferent work.